Ladies and gentlemen, today we're stepping into a subject that's as real as it gets: narcissism. But instead of just looking at the surface, we're going deeper. We're uncovering where it begins, why it happens, and what really fuels it. Alice Miller, a psychologist and author of The Drama of the Gifted Child, spent her life studying how childhood trauma and emotional neglect create the foundation for narcissistic behavior. Narcissists weren't born that way, they were made. And by understanding this, we don't just protect ourselves from their manipulation, we also break the cycle and stop feeding the wounds that created them. Let's explore 6 key insights from Alice Miller's work, 6 fundamental truths about narcissism that help us not only understand these behaviors, but also empower ourselves in dealing with them. 1. The pain behind the mask. Narcissists often project an image of superiority, power, and confidence. They demand admiration, seek control, and manipulate others to maintain their sense of self-importance. But beneath this carefully constructed mask lies deep and unresolved pain that traces back to their earliest years. Alice Miller's research shows that many narcissists were once highly sensitive, emotionally attuned children who craved love and acceptance. However, instead of receiving unconditional affection and support, they were forced to meet the emotional needs of their parents. They learned that their worth depended on achievement, obedience, or serving as an emotional crutch for caregivers who were themselves wounded. These children were not seen for who they truly were. Instead, they became what their parents needed them to be. To survive this emotional neglect, they constructed a false self, an identity built around external validation, control, and the suppression of their authentic emotions. This false self became a fortress, shielding them from the unbearable pain of rejection, inadequacy, and loneliness. Over time, this coping mechanism evolved into full-blown narcissistic behaviors. The tragedy of narcissism is that the person who wears this mask is still suffering. They are trapped in a cycle where they must constantly seek validation to avoid confronting their buried wounds. They may demand attention, exaggerate their achievements, or manipulate others into making them feel important. But underneath it all, they are terrified of being exposed as unworthy, unloved, or insignificant. For the people in their lives, this pain manifests as toxic behavior. The narcissist may gaslight, guilt trip, or emotionally manipulate others to maintain their fragile sense of self. They cannot tolerate criticism because it threatens to shatter the illusion they have built around themselves. They react with rage or withdrawal when faced with rejection because deep down, they fear reliving the original wound of abandonment. Understanding this hidden pain does not mean excusing their behavior, but it does allow you to recognize that their cruelty is not about you. It is about their own suffering. By acknowledging this reality, you can detach emotionally, refusing to be drawn into their chaos while still standing firm in your own self-worth. 2. The role of emotional neglect. Narcissists are masters of manipulation, experts at spinning words and situations to provoke a reaction. Their entire game is built around control, and they achieve it by pulling you into their web of drama, conflict, and mind games. They thrive when they can make you doubt yourself, question your worth, or react emotionally to their antics. But when you choose to disengage, to simply not react, you throw their entire playbook into chaos. Ignoring a narcissist doesn't mean you're weak or indifferent, it means you're reclaiming your power. They hate being ignored because your attention is their fuel. Whether they are showering you with false praise or trying to bait you with criticism, their goal is always the same: to keep you emotionally hooked. When you don't respond, it's like cutting off the supply they desperately need. Their tactics, whether it's gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or passive aggression, begin to lose their effectiveness the moment you stop feeding into them. Your silence becomes their frustration, your composure, their defeat. They may escalate their attempts, trying harder to provoke you, testing new angles to regain control, but your consistent refusal to engage dismantles their strategy. Ignoring them is not about pretending they don't exist. It's about choosing not to give them access to your emotional energy. It's a conscious decision to rise above the manipulation and not let their actions dictate your peace of mind. By refusing to react, you force them to sit with the emptiness they work so hard to avoid. They want to feel significant, powerful, and in control, but your indifference reminds them that their power is an illusion they can't sustain without your participation. This is why ignoring their tactics is not just an act of self-preservation. It's a way to disarm their influence entirely. 3. Narcissists loathe boundaries. Narcissists despise boundaries because boundaries represent something they cannot control: your autonomy and self-respect. They thrive on encroaching into your personal space, your emotional territory, and even your sense of self. When you draw a line and stand firm, it sends a message they can't ignore. This is my space, my rules, and you cannot cross them. Establishing and enforcing boundaries is one of the most powerful moves you can make, and it's something narcissists absolutely despise. Setting boundaries is not just about saying no to their demands. It's about making a clear declaration of your values, needs, and limits. It's about refusing to engage in the toxic dance they try to lead. When you enforce boundaries, you disrupt the very framework of their manipulative strategies. They can no longer rely on your compliance or emotional availability to feed their ego. But here's the thing: narcissists will test you. They will push, pry, and guilt-trip you, attempting to make you feel selfish or unreasonable for protecting your own well-being. They might shift between charm and aggression, trying every trick in their arsenal to bypass your limits. This is where enforcement becomes crucial. A boundary without enforcement is like a locked door with an open window. Narcissists will find a way in if they sense even the slightest hesitation. Enforcing boundaries means standing resolute in the face of their manipulation. It's about consistently refusing to engage in their drama, even when they escalate their tactics to make you feel uncomfortable or guilty. By holding your ground, you're not just protecting your own peace, you're sending a message that their games no longer work on you. The cycle of repressed pain. Unhealed childhood trauma doesn't disappear. It gets buried and manifests in destructive ways. Narcissists unconsciously project their unresolved pain onto others, often making the people around them feel the very emotions they themselves are trying to avoid: shame, insecurity, and self-doubt. This is why being around a narcissist can feel emotionally draining. They are constantly offloading their pain onto others instead of facing it within themselves. The power of awareness and boundaries. One of the most empowering lessons from Miller's work is that awareness breaks the cycle. If we recognize the origins of narcissistic behavior, we can choose not to engage in their emotional games. We can set boundaries, not to punish them, but to protect our own peace. By refusing to absorb their projections, we disrupt their pattern and refuse to play the role they expect from us. Awareness is our strongest defense against manipulation. 6. Healing and breaking free. Perhaps the most important message in Miller's work is that healing is possible for both the victims of narcissistic abuse and, in some cases, for the narcissists themselves. The key is confronting the buried pain and allowing oneself to feel what was once suppressed. This is not easy, and most narcissists resist it at all costs. But for those willing to do the work, true transformation is possible. For those dealing with narcissists, healing means breaking free from their cycle, reclaiming your emotional autonomy, and surrounding yourself with people who offer genuine, unconditional support. Understanding the roots of narcissism doesn't mean tolerating toxic behavior. It means seeing beyond the facade and choosing how we engage. By recognizing their pain, protecting our own energy, and fostering self-awareness, we reclaim our power. The more we educate ourselves, the less control they have over our emotional landscape. At the end of the day, it's not about fighting against narcissists. It's about rising above their influence and living authentically. When you thrive in your truth, when you no longer need their validation, when you stand firm in your boundaries, you take back your power. That is how you break free from the cycle of narcissism and build a life rooted in genuine connection, self-respect, and emotional freedom. Subscribe and follow for more insights on breaking free from toxic dynamics and reclaiming your personal power.